Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bronze Metalist Podcast. I am your headmaster, Kale.
And I am the wizard that is the chosen wizard. Harry Potter.
It wasn't as funny as I thought it was going to be.
Oh, man.
Hi, everybody. If you didn't understand that, my name is Kale, and this is the Bronze Metalist Podcast, a podcast where every week I have my friend Jaren listen to a different metal album, and we talk about them. We talk about the history and all kinds of other things about them. But before we get to this week's album, lots of things are going on. It's Christmas time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah, Happy
Happy snowy month.
Happy Yule.
Yes.
If you're pagan, I guess, Happy Yule. Yeah, lots of stuff going on. Jaren, what have you been up to? You've been out of town. We're recording this remotely. You've been out of town for a while.
Yeah, I went home to go spend the holidays with my family, and so this has been quite the learning experience trying to get all this set up. And I'm sitting in our spare room recording off of a portable mic, and you're in the studio, so to speak.
Oh yeah, the studio, aka my room. But you know, all because of you. Are you excited for the Christmas holiday?
I'm very excited. Christmas is my favorite time of year, and it actually didn't snow at all up until like 2 days ago. And
I was going to say, I thought you said it still, or I thought you were going to say it still hadn't snowed, and I was like, what the hell?
No,
where can I get some of that?
Now.
No, it definitely snowed very heavily yesterday in the wee hours of the morning. I woke up and I woke up at like noon or something like that. I walk out into my living room and we got all the blinds closed to keep some of the heat in. And I was like, I should look outside. And I looked outside and went, whoa, okay.
Oh, this is a change.
This is different. It all just kind of happened at once, which is always interesting. So what are your big old plans? You gonna have all kinds of relatives at your family's place, or do you guys go to your relatives' places?
No, luckily enough, all my family lives in the same town, or most of my family. So anybody who is out of town has to come here because there's no way we're moving. So that's really nice. Right before this, actually, as I was getting it set up, I kept hearing honking. And I was like, what on earth who's honking at? Like, what's going on? So I went and looked through the blinds of our like big window out front, and there's all my cousins waving their hands at my house. And I'm like, why didn't you guys just come in? And they're like, oh, we thought it'd be fun to honk for a bit. It's like, oh, okay. Merry Christmas.
Why not? You know, just sometimes it is fun to honk for a little bit.
That's true. I'm sure my neighbors enjoyed it as well.
Okay, so yeah, I've got an interesting holiday lined up. I'm still not quite sure exactly how it's working because both my sisters can only be around like early on Christmas Eve morning. So Saturday night I'm going to my parents' house so I can be there for that because we're just opening presents then because they're not going to be in town. Christmas Day, we usually go to my aunt and uncle's place. I'm not sure if that's what we're doing or if they're coming to our place this year. It's last couple years, Christmas in my family has been kind of a logistical nightmare. So
yeah, and it's hard when everybody grows up and gets married or just has other
places,
like other families that they have to hang out with. It just gets to be a mess of. Where do we go and when do we spend time with who?
Because we're in that middle phase of like the kids aren't old enough and there aren't enough of them, of the grandkids anyway, for my sister. And like my middle sister doesn't have any children, but like Callan's not old enough for them to start like their own Christmas tradition at their place. And I obviously don't have kids. My sister doesn't have kids. So, but like she's married. And I live in Minot, so it's like we're all kind of spread out, but we don't have an impetus to start our own Christmas traditions. We still come home and then go with whatever my parents are doing. So that's interesting.
It's it's weird because like my sister and her 2 kids and my brother-in-law, they'll go off, so we won't see them like on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. And then my cousins, a few of them are like going to their boyfriend and girlfriend's houses for Christmas. So that there's gonna be like, when there's normally like 20 people, now there's gonna be like 5 to 7 people for Christmas. So it's gonna be a weird and empty Christmas. But I guess that's just how growing up goes.
That's how it works, unfortunately. Seems we've reached the age where life stops giving things to us and starts taking them away. To quote the worst Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah. That was a good line, though.
That was a very good line in a very bad movie.
Yes.
Part-time. Anyway, there was a gift, and my mom knows what I'm getting her, but there was a gift that I have gotten her, finally. But yesterday, I spent probably 3 hours driving around trying to find a store that had the damn thing. It was out of stock. It was out of stock at Walmart. They didn't have it at all at Target. It was out of stock at Best Buy. It was they didn't have it at Herberger's, which seemed like a very appropriate thing for them to have at Herberger's, but it wasn't there. They didn't have it at well, TJ Maxx doesn't have anything for kitchen stuff, but like they didn't have it at JCPenney. It's like all these places I was like, it like kept on popping into my head. It's like, oh, I bet they'll have it there. And they didn't. And then today I was just like, all right, let's just start at Walmart and then, you know, make the rounds at the mall and see, you know, if there's like a kitchen store at the mall or whatever. Nope. Go to Walmart. Boom. Had it right there. So I got to cut my shopping day short, which was nice. And then I went to, I went to Barnes & Noble and got my nephew a couple of storybooks. So, yeah, that's now we're really done with Christmas. So, this week, Jaron, I had you listen to perhaps the opposite of a Christmas album. Not quite. I think the opposite of a Christmas album would be like some black metal thing.
Probably
like the Gorgoroth album or something would be the opposite of a Christmas album. No, this week I had you listen to Obscura by Gorguts, which is a Canadian death metal band. They're from Montreal and Quebec. They were founded in 1989 by lead vocalist and guitarist Luc Lemay. Lemay, right now, as it stands, is the only remaining founding member, and he's consistently been the driving creative force behind the band in general. They've gone through a couple hiatuses and breakups. Currently, they've been going strong since about 2008. Obscura is the first album that they had come out after their original hiatus. Originally, their style was considered sort of run-of-the-mill death metal. It was not particularly notable. Not that it was bad, but it sounded like every other death metal band that was playing in the early 90s. They had 2 releases. They had Considered Dead in 1991, and then Erosion of Sanity, which came out in 1993. Following Erosion of Sanity, the band ceased to perform live for like 5 years.
Oh man, was that planned that they were going to do that, or is that just how things turned out?
No, so apparently they started writing Obscura right after Erosion of Sanity came out, and they had it written, they were recording demo tapes, and nobody wanted it. So the thing that happened in 1993 is, so for a long time, death metal was the new thing. In the late 80s and the first couple of years of the 90s, death metal was new, it was fresh, it was exciting. And around 1993 is right when a lot of labels and sort of the fan base lost interest. Death metal had at that point failed to break into the mainstream the way that thrash metal had. You think about the late 80s metal, you think of Metallica, you think of Slayer, you think of Anthrax, you think of all these thrash metal bands that became household names, if not, respected by the mainstream, but they were mainstream bands and people knew who they were. Nobody knew who Gorguts was. Nobody even knew who Cannibal Corpse was at the time. So labels didn't care. They were on Roadrunner, which is one of the biggest rock labels in general. Roadrunner has hosted a ton of really, really talented metal bands over the years, and they got dropped from the label and they started writing Obscura, nobody else wanted them. Luke LeMay was quoted saying, "We jammed these songs for 4 years without writing anything else in hopes that someone would call us or something. I remember I sent some tapes to record labels and they didn't even write back. They were not even interested. We didn't even know if it was ever going to come out."
That's crazy. So would people listen to this album and be like, no, it's not for us? Or would producers and, labels just be like, no, we're not going to spend the time listening because it's, that we've kind of moved on past that phase?
I'm not sure, to be honest, but I imagine it's the latter. I think most labels at that time were kind of moving on from death metal. Labels like Metal Blade and Nuclear Blast. I think Nuclear Blast was around at the time, and Roadrunner in particular. Death metal wasn't a hot product anymore. They didn't want new albums from people that weren't currently signed. They didn't want to sign on new death metal bands. And so it was really tough to get a new death metal project out there. And, in the 90s was the age of grunge. And you had bands like Nirvana that were kind of becoming the underground that would eventually break into the mainstream. Extreme metal wasn't interesting anymore, at least to most label executives. Extreme metal was not interesting. But this album did eventually come out. In 1998, it finally got released. Gorguts came back. They started performing again, obviously, to support their new album when it finally got released. At the time, Luke LeMay was the only founding member. Everybody else had left because they weren't playing live. They couldn't get their album released. So pretty much everybody else just kind of stepped out.
Yeah, I imagine it'd be hard. It'd feel like a dead end, especially when labels won't even listen to your album because they think that your genre is outdated already.
And yet, when Obscura came out, there was a lot of really positive response to this album from critics. How do you think it went? Like, what do you think people think of Obscura?
I liked it. Like, I know you said that it was going to be really hard and like difficult to listen to, like not just like sitting and listening, but I really liked how it was like this weird like time signatures that were all kind of wonky compared to normal. I don't know. I just listening to it, it was like not necessarily a breath of fresh air because this is all new to me, but it was just like this weird kind of exciting, very different feel. So I can imagine that people like once they finally gave this a chance, were like, oh wow, there's something here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Obscura, since it came out, has been considered by multiple publications as being one of the most important albums in metal. Not just in death metal, not just in extreme metal, just like one of the most important albums to come out. It's, like you said, it's weird. It's ridiculously technical. But the thing about it is, like, you listen to most other tech metal or tech death bands today, you're going to hear a lot of reliance on speed and very fast tempos.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, that's not this album. Things, especially one of the songs in the middle, I believe it's Cloud or Clouded. That song is slow and sludgy and doomy. And a lot of the songs definitely have those parts, and it doesn't rely on this breakneck pace. The tempos are still there, but they are changing constantly. Like, you get whiplash just listening to it. The guitar work is really dissonant, and like the riffs, I don't know, I guess there are riffs. The riffs are mostly made up of just like these repeated like pinch harmonics, and in Obscura, which is the title track, I think it's the first song on the record, there's this really weird tapping that they do at one point, and like everything is so dissonant and legitimately atonal, which is so different than pretty much anything else you find in music that is this well written and well thought through. And instead of the vocals being this constant, like, always, growled and guttural, half the time he's like howling and there's hardly any grit to it. And it's like this almost like operatic there's no, it's almost operatic, but there's absolutely no melody to it, which doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense. He's just like howling, and there's not really any grit to it, but it certainly isn't clean. It's really interesting. This album is not something that I can listen to personally and just have like, and like really engross myself. I can be, if I'm doing something else, like I was making some maps for a D&D game that I have coming up. And like I was listening to it and I was jamming, but if I sit down and put my headphones on and try to listen to it for just 45 minutes straight and do nothing else, it might drive me crazy. It's like this album is like a fever dream almost.
That's a good way of describing it.
Hank Steamer of Pitchfork.com I think said it best. Obscura didn't just register as technical. It sounded downright excruciating, as if its shuddering blast beats, doleful bellows, and deliriously inventive guitar work were being torn straight from the chests of its makers. That was probably one of the best quotes I found describing the sound of this album. Like, it is otherworldly, even for a death metal album. Like, this album is kind of a trip. And I don't dislike it. I really do like this album. It's just tough for me to listen to, but I can say I'm surprised, I guess, that you enjoyed it so much. Not that I thought you weren't going to like it, but like that you did really enjoy it. I was kind of surprised.
Yeah, I was very surprised because I like, and I messaged you with like a screenshot of the album cover and was like, "Is this the right one?" And you were like, "Yeah, of course." And I was like, okay, I thought maybe I was listening to the wrong one because like I'm sitting here like enjoying listening to this music. Not that I don't enjoy everything else, but like I was just like, yeah, just like listening to it. And I was like, I've got to be listening to the wrong thing because Kale said this would be hard to listen to.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of surprised. Like on multiple re-listens, I think I've gotten used to it, but like the first, because I haven't listened to this album a ton. But I got into Gorguts probably about 5 months ago or so, and was looking up their history and found this album. I was like, wow, if this is so monumental, I got to listen to it. And it's really, now especially having listened to it so much this week, preparing for this podcast, I think I'm in agreement with you on like enjoying it. It's kind of similar for me to the first time I listened to Jane Doe by Converge. The very first time that I listened to anything by Converge, I was not impressed, and I thought it sounded bad. Like I thought the production quality was crap, and I didn't like the vocals. And then I sat down and forced myself to listen to Jane Doe because it's like so many people love this album. There's got to be something about it, and it just started to click. And I think Gorguts has started to click for me now. So, in conclusion about Obscura itself, ultimately for me, I think this album is full of a lot of really, really good ideas, and just balls to the wall creativity and musicianship. I don't think it's for everybody, but it's apparently for you because you liked it so much. I wouldn't consider this to be entertainment. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, and I agree that like I enjoyed listening to it, but I don't know that outside of like having it for this podcast that it would have been something that I would have like enjoyed if it would have just come on. But like knowing that I'm supposed to be listening to it and like, kind of dissecting it for this podcast, that's I think what made me enjoy it.
Yeah, and like to me, this album is less about entertainment and it's more about art in a sense. Like metal can be very entertaining. I think Cannibal Corpse is an entertaining band. I think Cattle Decapitation is entertaining. There is a lot of metal that is just entertainment. It's not meant to be taken seriously. There is some metal that is both. Cattle Decap, I think, qualifies. I think they have some serious things to say and they do some really creative work, but they're also, to me, very entertaining. But I think Obscura in particular, some other Gorguts albums are a bit less obscure, I suppose, or a bit less avant-garde. That's probably the best term to describe it. Is Obscura is avant-garde art. It is meant to be kind of crazy and strange and provoking. It's not meant to be just like, bang your head and have a good time. It's like, no, this is some crazy stuff that you gotta pay attention to.
Yeah, and I think that with a lot of music, like the most technically impressive and just like artistic vision and creativity and all like that, it may not be the best, like just like you're saying, entertainment song, but just because it's not like a fun, like just hangout song, doesn't mean that you can't just be in awe of like how technically amazing it is and all sorts of stuff like that.
Yeah. I think it's an album that certainly a lot of people appreciate, but maybe not necessarily enjoy. And that's how I used to feel. But like I said, over this last week, I've come to enjoy it a lot more than I had previously. So we'll see how I feel later on, I suppose. So, Gorguts, their story didn't end with Obscura. They're still around, but they did take a break not too long after this. So they would go on to release their next album, From Wisdom to Hate, in 2001. But pretty quickly after that, tragedy kind of struck. Not financial or label related this time, but personnel related. Their drummer, Steve McDonald, committed suicide in 2002. And the band mostly stopped playing, but they didn't officially split up until 2005. Talking about that breakup and that split up, Luc Lemay said that at the time he was, obviously a lot of them were really broken up about Steve's death. And that also he felt like they had left behind a pretty good musical legacy, particularly with how well, reviewed Obscura was and how important it became to the death metal community. He thought they had left behind a good legacy, and he was proud of what they had done, and he was all right with leaving it where they were. And he moved away from Montreal at that time and decided to focus on woodworking, which I guess is his other great passion. But they weren't gone for very long. They officially split up in 2005 and then came back 3 years later when, out of the blue, they released a demo tape online. It started getting passed around. They had programmed drums because at the time they hadn't gotten a drummer. Then they started performing live and announced that they had a new album coming out, or that they were working on a new album. But label problems struck again because the label that they had signed to got bought by a larger label, which is Century Media, which is a relatively big label in this industry. And that resulted in delays because they wanted to negotiate for a new contract because technically they were dealing with a new company. And it didn't work out with Century Media, so they looked around, got signed to a different label, and Colored Sands came out in 2013, which is their most recent full-length album. However, they do have another release that came out recently, that came out last year. It's called Pleiades Dust. It's a 33-minute long epic. It's one track.
Oh, serious?
Yes, it's one track that's 33 minutes long. Do you remember the last track on Obscura, Sweet Silence, and how it's kind of this long, winding instrumental?
Yeah, there's like it just yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So take that, stretch it over 33 minutes, and then add vocals here and there. And that's basically what Pleiades Dust is. I haven't listened to the whole thing either because I didn't.
That's crazy.
I didn't realize they had released it until now. I had listened to Colored Sands a little bit, but I had not heard of Pleiades Dust, and I listened to a little bit, and it was pretty cool. So yeah, that's mostly the story of Gorguts. They've got plenty of great stuff and great stuff to come, I imagine. That's mostly going to do it for our discussion of Obscura.
Yeah, the last two albums that you've had me listen to have really excited me. So
okay,
I don't know.
Well,
I'm getting into it. I'm all in.
You're learning. I suppose. Learning. And speaking of learning, next week you're going to have a chance to prove to me how much you've learned. We're going to sort of switch places. I messaged you about this earlier today, so this isn't a surprise to you. Next week, Jaron is going to be picking the album, and he's going to kind of do like a presentation for me on one of these albums. I'm going to give him a big old list of bands that he can choose from. He's going to pick an album of theirs. I would recommend that you go through and just see what their discography is like, and if you find a name or album art that strikes you, Just go with your gut, listen to it a little bit, and see if it's something that you want to talk about. Because I usually like to pick albums that I like or that I think are important. So I would recommend that you listen to it first before you make your final decision. On,
before I pick one that we both dislike.
Yeah. Well, that wouldn't be. I mean, it's always fun to tear something apart for a half hour.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know if that's what I want this podcast to be. So that's going to be your task for next week. So we'll once you pick it, I would recommend that you make a post on the Facebook page, Jaron, and let people know what your album is going to be. Speaking of our Facebook page, since we're wrapping up here, you can find us at Bronze Metalist Podcast. That's our name on most of our social media sites. We're also on Twitter. We're on Instagram. So anyway, yeah, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can, obviously, if you're listening to this, you are on either Libsyn or iTunes. If you are on one, please consider checking us out on the other, giving us a rating, a like, leaving some comments. It really helps out. Just spread the word. Tell your friends if you've got friends who like metal. Tell them about this podcast and, have them give us a listen.
Mm-hmm. Spread it like wildfire, you guys. Shout out to Hannah Davis. She listens to every week.
Shout out to Hannah Davis. Shout out to Spencer Bell, one of my friends who was unaware that we were doing this. He's a metalhead friend of mine. Yeah, we can give you shout outs. If you give us a rating, let us know and we'll give you a shout out on the podcast.
Yeah, we will.
I guess. Yeah. So next week, Jaron, I want you to dazzle me.
I will. I'll whip out the old razzle and dazzle.
Give me the old razzle dazzle. Okay, that's going to do it for Bronze Medalist Podcast. My name is Kale.
My name is Jaron.
Tagline pending.
Tagline pending.
I almost forgot what it was.